A Quest for a Diamond, Chapter 1. A diamond is one of the most beautiful stones in the world. I was a little girl the first time I saw one. My uncle Clavon had returned from the war and somehow managed to return with a diamond. I'll never forget that day. It was Almaro Day in my village of Almaro. Almaro Day was a celebration of our forefathers. Everyone would dress up and go to the main square of the village for the festivities. My family invited my Uncle Clavon. He was my favorite uncle. He was tall with dark curly hair that fell down to his shoulders. I always thought I was his favorite niece. He never paid much attention to my sister Mare. On this day, he waited for my parents and me to go get the meat stick vendor to get some sticks. They were really yummy with a spicy sauce on them. Uncle Cleavon led me aside behind a tent, so it was a secret between he and I. He was very dramatic about it. He said, "I'm going to show you one of the wonders of the world." He put his hand in his pocket and slowly brought it out. His large hands were clutched around it. And then he did a great reveal. He opened his hand slowly, and then it appeared. The most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He picked it up with his large thumb and forefinger, so the light passed through it gleaming with a beauty I'd never experienced. There was something about that stone, that glittering ice-like stone, that thrilled me utterly. My eyes were transfixed on this exquisitely beautiful stone. It wasn't very big, but to me, it was the most stunning thing I'd ever seen. When he visited, he would always bring the diamond with him, because I was so mesmerized. He told me a story of the mountains in Rugistan where diamonds come from. However, you have to travel rough seas and dangerous jungles to get there. I had dreamt of having my own for years. It was a plan of a lifetime to go to Rugistan and to get my own diamond. I asked many people if they'd ever heard of Rugistan. Some had stories of it, but they were based on fantasies of their own. One person told me of a mountain of diamonds that was a real pile of diamonds where you could just pick one up. Another story was that the diamond mountain would blind you with its brilliance. I also grilled my uncle on where he got it. He was pretty vague. I suspected he may have stolen it or won it in a card game. Uncle Cleveland was not regarded highly by my father, but even worse by my mother. She would complain that he was a worthless fool who wasted his time gambling instead of working a steady job. A couple of years after he showed me, I never saw it again. I was devastated. We never found out what happened to that stone, despite many attempts at the truth. He would just say, must have lost it. I lived in a trading village of Almaro, which is on the coast of the Roulon Sea. There was a lot of trading there. My father was an accountant that worked for one of the trading companies in town. Because of our access to the sea, our town revolved around trading from around the world. The town was always bustling with people. The area where the docks were located was on the other side of town from my house, but it didn't bother me to go there, despite my mother's warnings. "You don't go down to those locks. There are dangerous men down there." For years, it seemed like I'd sneak down to the docks to see if anyone knew of a ship going to Rugistan. I'd heard of one, but I never managed to find it. It had either just left or nobody'd seen it. Oh, more than anything, I wanted to go to Rugistan. I wanted to get my own diamond. I grilled my father over and over about Rugistan, thinking he might know somebody that his company dealt with that could get me to Rugistan. Unfortunately, my father said he knew nobody. I think at one point he was jealous of my uncle for having the stone because he seemed a little relieved when it was gone and I wasn't as excited to see my uncle. My father and I were very close. I think I was the boy he never had, except I was a girl. When I was 15, I learned of the ship Trezon that was going to Rugistan. Once I made a plan to get my diamond, I went to the docks and asked what ships were going to Rugistan. It was only by chance I discovered it. I was with my sister and mother at a local market. There were two men there talking in line ahead of us. I heard the word Rugistan and my ears perked right up. I inched up, hoping to hear anything I could. They were businessmen who were talking about a deal they'd just made with the ship Trezan to take their fabrics to Rugistan. I wanted to talk to them, but my mother was there, and there was no way I could say anything about it. My mother had scolded me on more than one occasion about my obsession with getting a diamond in Rugistan. I waited until I was free and made a beeline to the docks. I was frantic to find the ship before it left. I talked to the harbor master, who said the Trezan was leaving in a couple days. Quickly, I devised my plan. I knew this was my opportunity. I had never seen a girl on the docks. It wasn't the kind of place a respectable girl went, but that didn't bother me. I planned to be on that ship no matter what. I knew they'd never take a girl, so I cut my hair and I greased it so I looked like a boy. I also donned boys' clothes, so I would appear to be a boy. Confident I could pass as a boy, I went down to the docks to see if I could get a job in the galley of the ship. I was determined to get on the ship. I decided if they turned me down, I would somehow get on board and hide. I was going. I carried a bag. It was ready to go with little in the bag but a couple of shirts and my prized possessions, my mining tools to help me to find my diamonds. The Trezan was a big ship. It was one of the largest ships in the harbor. The sails were huge. They also had a flag at the helm of the ship with an image of a huge horned owl on it. The eyes were piercing. I watched the men work from afar at first. It fascinated me to watch them unfurl the sails while they were in port. There seemed to be a lot of activity around the ship. Men were busy loading crates of merchandise onto the ship. There was lots of shouting as the men maneuvered the crates aboard. I had heard it transported goods to islands on the Roulon Sea. That's where Rugistan is. I wasn't scared, I told myself. I'd never been away from home before anywhere without my parents. I knew my mother would be mad, but my father would understand, even though he wouldn't be happy about me leaving. A couple sailors walked by me. They never gave me a glance. I guess my disguise was good. They gave me courage. As I walked towards the ship, I could see one large, burly man. He had a dark, heavy beard with bushy, dark hair that hung down to his shoulders. He also had these weird caterpillar-like eyebrows. He was shouting orders to the men that were loading the vessel. I found him to be horribly intimidating. The sight of the man made me nervous. He appeared to be in charge, and most likely he'd be the one I need to speak to about a job. I walked down the ship to the gangplank. After a deep breath, I walked towards the burly man. I could hear the creak of every piece of wood on the dock as I approached. Next to him was a skinny, toothless man who was bare-chested, exposing a tattoo of a giant lion on his chest. The large man growled at me. "Where do you think you're going?" I stood as tall as I could, trying to make me seem older. "I need to see the captain about a job." Both men broke out laughing. "What can you do?" asked the skinny, toothless man sarcastically, exposing his barren mouth. I hadn't expected this kind of response. I thought I looked like a boy with the way I dressed. I had even slicked back my hair with grease to make me look like boys in the village. Perhaps they thought I couldn't do anything because I wasn't very big. I gathered my courage and spoke. "I can cook and clean." I know my words shook as I was nervous, looking at these two men who found my presence amusing. "Really?" asked the big man. I tried to be strong. "Yes. Are you the captain?" They both laughed. Then the big man looked at the skinny man. "Maybe he can cook. Better than the slop Menace gives us." After a moment, and he motioned me forward, I walked up to the deck, overwhelmed by the smell of both of them. Before I got 10 feet, I coughed. "You sick?" asked the skinny man. "Of course not. Just clearing my throat," I said with all the confidence I could muster. The big man grabbed me by the arm. "Come on." His grabbing me startled me, but I maintained myself, thinking only of getting the job as the cook. He led me across the deck of the ship. I noticed soldiers looking at me, wondering what this man was doing. He took me to the steps that led to the upper deck. I could hear men still shouting around the ship as they continued to load crates on board. When we reached a cabin door on the left of the steps, the man stopped, nodded to me as he knocked on the door. "Captain, got someone for you to meet." I heard a what? From the other side of the door, and then the door opened. The man who opened the door appeared to be the captain. He was a man in his 30s with long blonde hair pulled into a tail. His blue piercing eyes made him quite handsome. He looked at me. "What is it?" "This boy wants a job in the galley." The handsome man looked at me. "We already have a cook," he said sullenly. Fear struck me. My mind was already racing to how I would remain on the ship since the captain didn't want me. I also feared he might see through my disguise. The big man cut in. "Come on, Captain. Menace is a horrible cook. Maybe this boy can do better." The captain looked at me again, obviously mulling it over. "Perhaps he could be like a helper since he doesn't do much." The captain looked at me with his steel blue eyes. "Do you mind cleaning?" "Oh, no, sir," I confirmed. "What's your name, boy?" Luckily, I was prepared for this question, taking my father's name. "Roulon, sir." "Okay, Tarver, take him down to Menace and tell him he has a helper." I was so ecstatic I could scream, but I contained myself. I figured I got through the first hurdle, now to the cook. I hoped it wouldn't be a problem. Tarver led me down the bowels of the ship where the galley was located. We walked down the ladder like steps to reach the kitchen. At first it appeared dirty. There were dirty dishes in the sink and various bowls and plates, most likely dirty, sitting on the counter. The floor also looked like it hadn't been mopped in quite a while. It had heavy pots on a big stove. Utensils hung securely with pots from the ceiling. Steam rose from a pot of water on the stove. The kitchen was connected to a fairly big room with tables and benches on the other side. The kitchen was larger than my mother's kitchen. Tarver yelled, "Menace!" There was no response. I peeked around the doorway that led to the dining area. I noticed a man lying on one of the benches. I cleared my throat to get Tarver's attention, and then pointed to the man on the bench so Tarver would see him. Tarver shouted again, "Menace!" The boy stirred a little. Tarver marched over to the man's bench and then kicked the bench hard, startling the man so he fell on the floor. Menace was a small man with a head of white hair pulled back into a tail. He was messy looking, with his hair hanging loosely. He also had a scruffy white beard. He looked up, his eyes were puffy and barely opening. "What?" It's obvious the man was drunk. He scrambled to get up, but had difficulty standing except for the support from the table. Tarver got up in his face. "Whiskey. You want some? I have." Before he could finish, Tarver stopped him. "No, I don't want whiskey. You shouldn't be drunk." "We're on leave, aren't we?" the old man slurred. "That was yesterday. Captain just hired you a helper. His name is Roulon." He motioned me forward. I was nervous. I hung at the doorway. I'd seen drunks before. Didn't really care for them. They are always unpredictable. One of the girls from my school had a father who was a drunk. She came to school a few times with a bruise on her from when he was drunk. I looked at the man, wondering how he was going to take working with someone. I took a couple steps forward, and in my most respectful voice I said, "Hello, sir." The man's red eyes tried to focus on me. His breath was reeking of liquor. The man could hardly stand up, even with the support of the table. I feared he would fall. "He ain't no Sir Roulon. He's a drunken lout." Menace tried to see me as if his eyes were clouded. "Menace, you better get moving," Tarver snapped. "Dinner should be in about an hour. I'll leave the kid here to help you. You need to clean that mess up in the kitchen." Menace nodded. He waited for Tarver to leave before he fell onto a bench. He ran his fingers through his white locks, trying to get himself together. I could see he was not going to be cooking. Immediately I took over. I put my bag down on the floor and was prepared to prove myself worthy of this job. Menace, please let me help. Why don't you lie down for a while? My friend had told me it was best when his father slept when he drunk. To evade any altercations, I figured that would be the best plan. I'll get dinner ready. How many are we feeding? In his stupor, he looked up at me. 30 or so. Then I saw him search for his bottle, which was sitting under the table. Once found, he took a sip. I went into the kitchen. First, I needed to clean up the mess. I washed the dishes in the sink and cleaned the counter. I thought I could clean the floor later. I needed to figure out how to cook for 30 people. I'd never cooked for more than my parents and my sister, and even that wasn't much. First, I needed to see what I had to work with. I found their pantry, and then after seeing what I had to work with, I decided on making a simple stew. I went to work peeling potatoes, cutting carrots, onions, and preparing the meat for the stew. I looked over into the dining area. Menace had fallen asleep on the bench he was on. I decided this was my opportunity to make good impressions on the captain and the crew. I set the tables working around the sleeping Menace. I put out bread and butter on each of them, and after about an hour I heard footsteps coming down the steps to the galley. It was Tarber and the skinny man. Tarber looked over at me. I was stirring the pot of stew. We could smell that food up top. Smells good, Tarber praised. He looked around the dining area and saw Menace on the bench. He walked over and kicked the bench, sending Menace to the floor. Better get up. Captain will be down in a few minutes. And then there was a sound of many footsteps coming down the stairs. The sailors began arriving, taking their places at the tables, quickly jumping into the bread on the table. Menace quickly got up and joined me in the kitchen. He held onto the counter, still clutching his bottle, as he watched me dish up the stew. He put his bottle on the counter, trying to wake himself. He rubbed his face as if that would do it. Once I could see he was steady, I handed bowls of stew for him to distribute to the waiting sailors. He smelled the stew and nodded approval. I was surprised at his response. I picked up 2 bowls and went into the dining room, placing the bowls in front of the hungry sailors. The first sailor took in a deep smell and took no time to spoon it up. Menace put down his bowls, and I noticed a look from Tarber at him, apparently still smelling the liquor. The other men must have expected it, because none said anything. Quickly, I returned for more bowls and continued bringing the bowls to the men. I didn't hand any more to Menace. He stood in the kitchen watching me distribute the bowls. In moments, the room was full of boisterous men. I heard a comment from one of the men. Good stew, Menace. Who's the kid? Another asked. Tarber had no problem filling them in. He's Menace's new helper. I heard someone say, You mean the new cook? This stew is the best grub we've had in weeks. No way Menace made this. Yeah, too good to be Menace's. Thanks, kid. Great stew. Then the captain walked in. As soon as he entered the dining room, I saw Menace grab his bottle and walk out. Everyone got very quiet as he put himself at the head of the table. I took him a bowl of stew. He ate a spoonful of stew, and a smile came over his face. He said nothing else, but ate in relative silence. So did everyone else. It was quiet, with only the sound of people eating. It was kind of creepy. I found it curious that the men didn't speak around the captain, but later I would learn why. After the crew finished eating and returned to duty, Menace returned, and it was just Menace and I. First, there were no words between us. I just went to work cleaning up. Basically, he let me take over bringing the dishes from the dining area to wash. I didn't know if he was still recovering from his drunk or what. It wasn't until I washed everything that he even acknowledged that I was there. Then in a gravelly voice he said, I guess you need a bunk. There's a place in the storeroom we can hang a sling on for you to sleep on. You'll find one in the back of the room. I've used it. There's no extra bunks. You should be comfortable enough. Thanks. I felt kind of sorry for him. It seemed like nobody liked him or was cooking. I wondered why this old man was doing such a thankless job. After telling me of my sleeping quarters, he disappeared. I decided to go back up on deck. Seemed very busy. I guess they were getting ready to leave. More big crates were being loaded on board. Tarver was directing them. I walked over to him. "Are you the captain's first mate?" He smiled. "Yes, you could call me that, but really means nothing. I'm just Tarver." I didn't know what that meant, but I felt I shouldn't ask. "Are we leaving soon? Anxious to get away, boy? The law looking for you?" I was shocked by the implications, but didn't want to give away too much. I've never been on a ship before. I'm looking forward to the journey. He laughed and motioned to the skinny man to join us. "Axe, he's looking forward to the journey." They both laughed as Axe joined us. "Why is that funny?" I asked. Axe smiled with his toothless smile. "The Maribon is the most treacherous sea I've ever sailed, especially going to Rugistan." I stood a little straighter. "I'm not afraid." "You may change your mind," said Tarver as he ran to help some men with another crate. Axe turned to me. "Gonna be a long journey. Be prepared." "How long before we reach Rugistan?" "Few weeks." He thought a moment and said, "Do you know anything about Rugistan?" "No, not really." "They have good beer, but I guess not the kind of place you want to spend much time." "Really?" "Yeah, I've never gone further than the pub. But I've heard stories." Tarver tells stories of it being rough, maybe. "Why?" You'll see." He walked away to help some men with some more crates. I watched as they loaded the crates. I wondered what was in them and why Rugistan was rough. Despite my dire warning, I was going to Rugistan. I was going to get my diamond.